Thanks, everybody. So welcome to my talk about how to spot theater and how to survive buzzword bingo and how to spot it yourself. Outside of the tech squad, I'm a member of a team of 6 people within Merchant Services CPO. That's the transformation coaching team. So you see the pictures of my colleagues here. Everything you will hear today that you will like is based on conversation, knowledge sharing, discussions with all of these people. Everything you will hear today that you do not like is based on me. It was, after all, it's my decision what I put in here. These are my words, so I'm taking clear ownership of what might trigger you. And that brings us to the safety instructions for this talk, because it can be a rough ride for some of you. Marc-Henri said 2 years ago at the Expert Community Summit that we need to disturb and disrupt. And finally, I can deliver on this request. We will do this, but we need to do this with some boundaries. And the first one is from Felix von Leitner, also known as Fefe. He's a security expert, and he says, a good consultant will not only tell you what you want to hear, but also what you need to hear. This talk will contain a lot of content from the second category. And the other thing is, this is about patterns. This is not about people or concrete situations. This is very important because I find it rather cowardice to stand here and then talk about individuals who cannot give a counter argument. So it will be about patterns that you see. If you think, oh my God, that's exactly what I see, okay, then it's a good pattern, obviously. It's very relevant. And the third one is, you can talk about theater and you can be very bitter, cynical, disappointed and so on. But I think that's not very engaging and it's also not fun to listen to. So let's do it with style and with a smile. That being said, so what is theater in this context? Theater is about a huge gap between what is said, what it really means, and what happens. And you might say, yeah, there's always a gap between that, but it's about a larger gap. And one of the first things to say about theater is, okay, theater is not always done on purpose or with bad intentions. Always assume good intentions if you see it happening. And the other very important thing is, we can always do better than that. That's one of the things that brought me here. I think we can do better than that. It's not necessary to have theater at the workplace. So let's start with a very simple example. Does anybody in the audience know this flag? Where is this from? Let's see. Yes, Germany is right. That's already very good. But it was a specific kind of Germany that the younger ones happily do not remember. It was Eastern Germany between 1949 and 1990. It was the German Democratic Republic, also known as Eastern Germany. And let's imagine that they hired a consulting company. We want to do a democracy assessment. And the consulting company went in and ticked all of the boxes. They said, well, you have democracy is already part of the name. That's good. You have a parliament. That's also good. You have several political parties. That's also good. You have regular elections. Also good. And you got great reviews, at least the internal ones. So was this a democracy? Was this really good on the democracy scale? No. And just being a bit serious for the moment, so this is what happened exactly 71 years and 1 day ago. So you had tanks rolling through the country, people were arrested, people were killed. This is what happened when people voiced that they were not so happy, actually. And you got other things happening as well, a bit closer to today. So this woman here, for instance, got shot when she tried to cross the border within Berlin, the Berlin Wall. This baby here, 15 months old, also didn't survive an attempt by the parents to cross the border. And this guy here was also shot, was one of the last people who died. It was in 1989, very early. Usually people have more empathy with women and children, but I find the picture of the guy the scariest because it's not a black and white picture. So it reminds me of our times. So this is what happened really. And I wanted to show some of the pictures of the victims because I don't find it appropriate to show the flag and then not the people who were affected by it. So this is how theater looks like. Costs people's life, and if it's about a political system. But we can always learn from history. And the thing you learned with a very dramatic example, how can you spot theater in general? Okay, theater uses weak signals. Theater uses labels, specific use of language. Theater uses artifacts that you can show around and say, look, we got this. And theater relies on only showing successes. Those are all very weak signals. And if you have the real deal, you have all of the, on the left side, the weak signals, but you also got some strong signals. And the strong signals would have easily measured that this was not a democracy, because you can see, okay, how do those on the top behave? What capabilities do those below have? For instance, they were not capable of changing the government without bloodshed. That was not possible. And what's the level of trust? And by building a wall, the government showed we don't trust our own people. And people trying to cross the border showed we don't trust the government. So the things on the right side usually are more abstract and they're harder to measure and harder to visualize. That's actually the problem. But we can do better, I said. And the first reason why is talking about theater is a huge waste. And first, it's a huge waste on the human level. You have people, you might say, okay, fear or anger, those are emotions, they are not necessarily negative. Okay, I get this. But being kind of paralyzed, being confused, maybe becoming bitter, being demotivated, those are all costly things to have on a human level. And after a short period of time, you will see the impact on a financial level as well. So theater is a huge waste on human talent. This is why we should do better. But there's also good news. There's always something you can do, even in times of theater. There are more people aware of it than you might think. You're not alone. If you think, oh, around me, I see a lot of strange things going on, you might only not be aware of who sees the same. So this is one of the first steps to get out of it. And it's important to prepare yourself for the time that theater is over. So maybe there is a big transformation coming and it's meant for real. So it's important to not basically shut down completely, but look for the signals so that you know this is really worth investing my time and energy. And let's go through some cases of theater, and we start with a classic example. I see the first smiling faces in the audience, agility. This is indeed a well-explored topic regarding theater, but I still see it happening every now and then. And how does it work? So agile theater is when you're here, we need to become faster, we need to become more agile, we need to deliver what we promised. As I said, theater uses weak signals, so maybe these things are said by people and they're said in good faith with good intentions. The only problem is they don't mean anything, so they are not good as signals. How does reality look like? Like this. So this is a real example, happily not us, but this is an example where you had teams, you're working in an agile way every 2 weeks or whatever, they got something done. But if you looked at the overall picture, there was no speed in the overall picture. You had many decisions, many stops, a lot of waiting times and so on. So obviously agility is not about how a team works. Agility is always measured at a higher level, at the overall level. When do we solve a problem? When do we work on a customer opportunity? What's the speed? What's the rate? What's the quality? What's the outcome? That's true agility. So, how to spot whether it's the real deal? As I said, it's important. So agility has some costly signals, and one of them is that you look at customer outcomes. What problem do we actually solve for the customer? Do we solve it at the right speed, the right quality? Do we have time to iterate? Do we have time to innovate? That was already a topic today. Do we have a learning culture? And everybody will say, I love learning, I love a good culture, but learning culture means that we do not talk about our successes only. Learning culture means that about 80% of our ideas will not work out as we expected. And a learning culture means that we openly talk about it, that we spend our meetings not talking about this was great, this was great, this was great, but we thought about this, then we did this, then we measured it, and we learned it doesn't work as we expected, so now we are trying something else. This is a very strong signal. And then managers becoming leaders. This might also sound very old and known, but it is a very strong signal. Whenever you see managers not managing but really leading, then you know, okay, it's for real. And if you want to know more, last month at the Techforum Iberia, I talked about the Agile leadership training. We will talk more about what does it actually mean, Agile leadership. So I will not spend too much time here. Yes, there's an internal training you can take, but you can also just watch the talk. Let's rather focus on another example of theater, and this is still going strong, DevOps theater. So DevOps theater works like this. You might hear statements like, we want developers to take more responsibility, or we are really going serious with incidents, we will assign them to one team, or we want strong checks before every release. As I said, these can be good intentions, but they don't mean a lot. They can even express the opposite. So they are pretty meaningless statements. And how is this theater played out? So I draw my own picture about the situation that you usually get when people talk about why do we want DevOps? And they say, look, our problem in the company is we are just throwing stuff over the wall. I only have here 4 different actors because otherwise the picture would get too big. But business or somebody who decides on what to build throws stuff to the developers, they throw it at operations, and at one point it gets thrown at the customer. Of course, we need DevOps because everybody is unhappy except business, they are angry. No. And then you do not get DevOps, you get something else. You get DevOps. And you might ask, what's the difference between DevOps and DevOps? And you can see, well, they solved the problem. They said, look, we are not throwing stuff over the wall. We are also throwing a lot of other stuff back over the wall. That's our solution. But the difference between DevOps and DevOps is the second one, and I will not say this anymore because it's this DevOps thingy. Ops is always louder than dev. It's always disrupting. And after a short amount of time, it gets really annoying. So this is why I will not do this for the rest of the presentation. But you get the idea. So the thing is, somebody decided it must be on the developers, so they need to get more stuff, and they get a lot of stuff thrown at them, and they're even more unhappy now. That's DevOps. And you might say, yeah, for some it's better. You now have information security. They weren't even in the picture before. For them it's better, but everybody is still very unhappy about it. So the people look like this, like the cat. And this is how developers look like, in my experience. They are always afraid that somebody will interrupt them when they're trying to solve a problem and throw something else at them. And nobody's really happy. You're just managing all of the ticketing queues, alerts, and nobody knows what's going on, like on the previous picture where you couldn't see the errors going to the customer because there were too many internal errors. But how would it look for real? So you might have seen this picture before. So real DevOps is about several things, but the most important thing you were missing in the bad picture was there was no feedback loop from developers saying, okay, we have too many things, or we would need a process improvement, or we need another way of getting this done if we want to get fast and at high quality at the same time. So feedback loops in the overall system that can be started by everybody, this is one of the most important concepts of DevOps, feedback loops, not speed. And looking at the whole system, here in this system, you gave all the responsibility on the developers, but not the authority to make decisions. And this imbalance of responsibility and power is already a very good hint at what's going wrong. How would you know whether DevOps is for real? Now, there are several things. And so for starters, I like an article about DevOps principles. And those 3 principles are indeed flow or systems thinking. You want to improve the overall system and you want to improve the overall flow of the things. So again, the whole picture. And the other one, indeed, amplifying feedback loops. And one of the things is closing the feedback loops earlier. Feedback loops that take longer than a month are usually worthless. It would be like, okay, I set the temperature in my room and 6 months after that it will take effect. This is completely worthless. You can't do anything with this. And the third one is a culture of continual experimentation and learning. And again, we have experimentation, trying things out at a low cost, so these experiments are safe, learning fast, so closing the feedback loop, and then being able to make the next decision quickly and by everybody who's involved. If you want to know even more about this, there's a very nice book. It's called Accelerate. This is empirical science, which I like a lot. And the best of it is we as Worldline employees have free access to this book via Percipio. And if you don't like reading a book, you can listen to it because we also have free access to the audiobook. And now you might say, yeah, okay, but reading a whole book, why would I do this? This is you do not have to read this, but this is a thing I pull out every time somebody talks about DevOps. And this is on a free PDF from the same authors of the book. They basically made an overview about what they found applying empirical science, what influences what. So everything here is proven empirical science, okay, which part influences what. And if you look at this PDF, you will find, okay, on the right side, commercial performance, so the stuff you really care for if you're a company. But on the left side, you will find leadership behavior. So all the technical practices and cool words and so on, they are somewhere in the middle. In a nutshell, this means empirical science is proven that leadership behavior influences everything else, including commercial performance. So if you ever needed an argument to read this yourself or to show this to your manager, this is basically it. And you might say, well, it won't get better than this. It will get better than this. Because as we heard today, we already had an event a couple of weeks ago, and there was this charming lady, Sirena Ramdani from Google, a tech person from Google, and I asked her, you know what is your view on DevOps, on practices and so on? And she said, the most important things, she didn't say buy our products or use this or that tech thing, was a zero-tech answer. She said, the most important thing is reflection, so kind of retrospectives, looking back every now and then in a regular cadence and often enough so that you can learn and adapt. And the second one was continuous improvement, which is really hard if you really want to do it, namely always aiming at better. She said, if you're very good and you don't do this, after a couple of months, you will be mediocre at best. And that's an answer from one of our sponsors, so I find this really cool that they say the same. They don't talk about technology, they don't talk about applications or something like this. They say, okay, it all comes down to human behavior and how you organize your work and what you permit your tech people to do. And the third point from here was DORA metrics. DORA metrics are not about Dora the Explorer. DORA metrics are the 4 standard DevOps metrics that you measure and that are part of this study. And that are displayed, and you might say, okay, I've never heard about them. If not, then it's time to learn. And luckily, we have a talk about DORA metrics from last year at the Techforum. So we have a nice half-an-hour talk by Carlos da Silva about it, and he will tell you more about it. If you've never heard about them, this is a great talk, I think. It's a very nice introduction to the topic. And I would always watch out for are people showing and talking about the DORA metrics, not alone, but at least about the DORA metrics if it's DevOps. Now let's go to the third topic, and this is a bit more controversial because agility was old and known, DevOps was still going strong, and now we have the product-led company, also known as the product operating model. And I want to repeat one thing that I said at the very beginning. I said patterns over people, which means I will not comment on specific things or on specific people. This is very important to keep in mind. And I wrote here that this is a high potential candidate, meaning it is not relatively new, but for many of us, it seems like it's the first time they come across those terms. So I will make a prediction about what might happen. Or a forecast, if you want. What might happen, what could go wrong in the future. I said it's not about concrete situations. So, product operating model theater can look like this. So people will tell you maybe one of those things. They will say it's a radically different and new approach. This time we are really doing it different. Or they will say we will work based on value streams. That will be a topic for another talk. or they will say empowered product teams. And as I said before, these statements can all come from people who really mean this, who really want to make a difference, who really want to change things. The only bad thing is that all of these statements have no value on their own. They are all weak signals. And how to spot this? Well, the first very easy thing is, okay, empowered. And you might think, empowered, empowerment, wasn't there something? Yeah, we've read this empowerment before. Yeah, there was this document, the Worldline Values Handbook. Oh yeah, and if you read this, you don't need to read this now, of course, but if you read this, it actually does the one thing that's really important. It balances power and responsibility. It talks about both. It names it accountability, which is even better than responsibility. It says you get the power to decide and you're also accountable for what happens. This is a very good approach. The not so easy question is, if we already have this in our values handbook, why are we not doing this? Or why would we need a new approach to arrive at what we already said we would be doing or what we wanted to do? And this is a bit about speculation about values. I think it's a good value on its own, and the set of values we have is also very good. There's one thing about values. Nobody will say, I don't like empowerment. It's a positive value. Nobody will disagree with positive values. The trickiness comes when you need to make a choice between two positive things. Imagine if you say, I value empowerment more than control. Then you need to make a choice. And for many people, control is important. We have a history of being close to banks, and control, predictability is very important. So the moment you need to make a choice and say, I think innovation is more important than everything happening according to plan. Or empowerment is more important than feeling in control all of the time. Then it really counts. That would be an important discussion to have about our values, so that they become principles that we can act upon. That we can say, okay, this really forces us to make a difficult, a tough decision about what's more important. That would be about our values. Then, value streams. They are not mentioned literally in the product operating model, but value streams, you might say, wait a moment, value streams? Yeah. So if you say we are working in value streams and it's about the same kind of team you had before, development team that does something, but there are a lot of teams and decisions up front, a lot of teams and decisions down the road, that's not a value stream. A value stream would be about the overall flow of potential value, and one of this picture is, of course, a drastic oversimplification. In a real value stream, you would see somewhere the customer at the very end, and you would see feedback loops coming back and improving the overall flow from we see an opportunity, we act on it, we get feedback from a customer, and we incorporate that feedback. The time to incorporate feedback, that would be a very critical measure to have and to improve, actually. So it's not only about delivery, it's not even about time to money, it's not even about time to learn, but how fast can we adapt based on the feedback we collect from a customer. That's what value streams are about. And everything else is theater, I would say. So value streams need to be about a visualization of the overall thing, about collecting relevant metrics, and then improving the setup that you have, however you do it, to better serve the purpose. And yes, I need to use at least one French word if I'm already in France, and déjà vu is actually, so you've seen, you might think, yeah, wait a moment, all these terms, I've heard them before, you know? Well, value streams, also shorter feedback loops, continuous improvement, learning culture, and managers becoming leaders. Yeah, you might have heard it earlier in this presentation, but you might also have heard it already outside of this presentation. And these are all parts of the product operating model. Maybe they're not stated in the same way, but there are a lot of principles about this, and there are more principles than you will see here. I have limited talking time, but you might think, wait a moment, if this is a radically different approach, what is this? And you will find out, yes, that behind what is now presented as a product operating model, you will find a lot of things that you might have heard under different label, under Lean, under Agile, under DevOps, and it's the same context. And these concepts are not new. They are from the second half of the 20th century. So sometimes they're even 60 years old, 2 generations. So this is not new. They might be radically different. They might be very challenging to implement, but they are not new. And you might ask, so is this really polite to speak about the authors of the product operating model like this? It is, because they said it themselves. I'm just quoting them here from the latest book that was published earlier this year, about 3 months ago. They say it themselves. They say nothing that we present in these books is new. It's mostly a collection of best practices or how the best companies we've seen perform. So this is basically it. And they see themselves as curators and evangelists, so spreading the word, getting it out. So if it's nothing new, that's okay. If it's for you the new and it's the first time that you hear it. But the product operating model itself is not so new, except for one thing. If you hear product operating model, where would you think would be the difference or the new stuff, or what will get more attention? What do you think? I see thinking faces, but not yet an answer. Nah, I'll do the spoiler. It will not be product, although it's called product operating model. So we hear a lot about you need to define your products. We need to become a product company, not a services company. And those things are all fine. However, the biggest change that I would expect is not on the product side, it's on the tech side. So how could you measure whether the product operating model is becoming real, it's becoming true? I can understand if product managers say great stuff and product leaders say it's great for us, but actually the books are very harsh on product managers and on product leaders. The books are very tough. They say product leaders need to level up, they need to learn a lot of things, they need to change their behavior. Product managers need to level up, they need to change a lot of things, they need to learn a lot of things. But the books are full of praise for tech people. And that was a big surprise. Marty Kagan says tech people are so good, they are mostly underpaid and totally underused. They're not taken seriously, they're not given the space they would need. And tech here also includes design, by the way. And from 3 books, hundreds of pages, I picked out the quote I like the most, also because it's in a free available article online, which is called The Most Important Thing. And it says, basically going cheap to recruit an army of people who code the stuff that you have decided this is completely incompatible with a product operating model. In the same way that a company would not outsource its CEO, it would not outsource the people who are doing the work, because you gain so much knowledge and the people have ideas on what to actually build. So don't involve the tech people just for the building, involve them in finding good ideas and testing ideas very early. So for a tech community, I would say if people promise to me that product operating model, I would ask, when do we see this? When do we get involved very early on in making decisions and being involved in the conversations? When do we stop getting orders? When are we treated like missionaries and not mercenaries? This is a concept that's in those books a lot of time. And yeah, if the article is called The Most Important Thing, maybe you could say, yeah, maybe there are a lot of articles that have these very important sounding titles, but this is at the end of this book. And it also says you don't need geniuses to this work. You just need ordinary people to get extraordinary results. Just treat them like they need to be treated, and then you get the results. So for the tech community, I think this is a great thing to come if you watch out for this and ask around. But after all of this theater and what to watch out for real, you might ask, yeah, but what can I do? So how do I survive theater? If I find out after all these tests that I'm living in a theater, what can I do? So I said there's always something you can do. The first and most important one is, of course, do not use weak signals yourself. Do not confuse other people. So stop using the language that's actually weak. Send strong signals. And the second one is become knowledgeable. I tried to show some sources here. You will get access to the presentation where there are a lot of links. I'm showing some book titles that are also about, okay, how can you improve your own situation if you see a lot of theater or anti-patterns and so on. There's more to learn about all the things I talked about. Here I can scratch a bit on the surface to see it, but I think it's important. It's always better to know whether something is true or not than just to have a gut feeling. I think gut feeling is not a very good thing to guide you. And then ask questions. There are big meetings online or in person where you can ask questions, where's Q&A. Ask the questions, as I said at the beginning, with style, with a smile. So ask them in a polite way, but ask challenging questions. A lot of times you can tell a lot from the Q&A and how Q&A is handled. And the side effect of good questions is that other people will see that you have spotted something, that you are interested in knowing more, that you are just not a consumer of the news, you want to know it. And that can lead to you connecting to other people. And if you're very interested, you can even form a community of practice or a round of professionals who are very interested in a specific topic, who then can come together and ask, okay, what can we do together? And this will overcome the feeling of being alone, the feeling of being lost. Even if you cannot change everything overnight, you have more options if you're knowledgeable and together with other people. And you keep challenging the people. This is also a good recipe against theater, because people find out, okay, it's very hard to maintain theater even if they want it. And lastly, the most important thing is finding creative and constructive ways to deal even with the situations that you do not like. I've seen this throughout my career in and outside of the company. I've seen many people who became very sad and bitter and gave up and so on. I think that's not the best way to approach a situation. If there's any chance, try to find a creative and constructive way. I know people who blog about their experiences regularly. I think that's very, very good. It's therapeutic, and you can also see who reacts to it, what resonates with other people. Always work on something. If you're a tech person, you know it's better to work on something than just to sit there and feeling lost. Now, you might say surviving theater is actually not the real deal. That's dealing with the symptoms. We should actually overcome theater. Yeah, that's true. Overcoming theater requires two things. It always requires leadership. That's what I said several times about all of the topics. And it requires people who are willing to look through this stuff and who are willing to do the real deal when it comes. So part of this preparing for the real deal is about being an approachable partner for management when they want to do it for real. Because a lot of times it will be about, are people ready to accept it? Will people accept the change? And from my experiences with dealing with Worldline colleagues, it is most people are very capable, they are very aware of problems we have, they want to solve things, and they are willing to do things that might be uncomfortable at the very beginning. Sometimes it might be overcoming fear and the illusion of control. In a complex world, most of control is an illusion. In the last years, we had plenty of bigger world events that have shown us that control is an illusion, predictability is an illusion. So getting ready for this, for being a reliable partner in very challenging endeavors, for me, would be the best recipe for overcoming theater. And that was the talk.
Thank you. So we will end this talk here. Thanks for all of us. Thanks you.